I have recorded a ton of videos this offseason just laying out arguments for a bunch of players that I've been acquiring all year long. And fortunately, a lot of those arguments still hold true today, so whether you're new to the channel or just need a reminder of why I love all of these players, here are 6 of my favorite trade targets before the start of the 2023 NFL season. In his last 2 full seasons played, Dak Prescott has averaged almost 4,700 yards and 34 touchdowns while averaging a 5.5% touchdown percentage and 8.2 yards per attempt. Now, you might have thought that this was a Dak Prescott stat to know, but it's actually a Justin Herbert stat because those 2 seasons of insane production from Dak Prescott came in Kellen Moore-led offenses, who is now the offensive coordinator for the LA Chargers. Prior to Kellen Moore taking over the offense in Dallas, Dak was averaging only 7.4 yards per attempt and a 4.5% touchdown percentage, having never thrown for over 4,000 yards or 30 touchdowns in a single season. Now enter Kellen Moore in 2019, and in the first year in Moore's offense, Dak threw for 4,900 yards and 32 touchdowns, supporting not one but 2 top 24 receivers for fantasy, plus another top 40 receiver, and Ezekiel Elliott was the RB3 on the season with 350 touches himself. And while Justin Herbert has been great to start his career in LA, he's also only averaging 7.2 yards per attempt and a 4.8 touchdown percentage in his first 3 seasons. Now enter Kellen Moore into the Chargers offense, who's about to do the exact same thing to this offense that he did to Dallas, which is make it explosive, make it efficient, and make it all about his primary weapons. Justin Herbert could have an insane 2023 season in Moore's offense. I'm talking a Patrick Mahomes level, 5,000 plus yards, 40 plus touchdowns level season, like he kind of already did in 2021, finishing as the QB3 on the season. And again, Herbert did that while supporting 2 top 15 receivers, and Austin Eckler was still the RB2 overall in fantasy. There is no doubt in my mind that Justin Herbert and the entire Chargers offense is just about to have a career year in 2023. But let's say you want that fantasy RB1 production, but you don't have a first to pay and you just need some cheaper production. For that, I'd point you to James Conner, who was also a huge draft day winner, as the Cardinals didn't even touch the running back position at all, and also drafted Paris Johnson 6th overall to beef up that offensive line. Since joining the Cardinals back in 2021, James Conner has been a top 10 fantasy running back in points per game in back-to-back years, averaging 17 points per game in 2021 and 15.5 points per game in 2022. Now in 2023, Conner will be the workhorse back once again, and that should translate to back-end RB1 production for fantasy, even on a team without Kyler Murray for most of the season. In fact, small sample size, but in the 4 games after Kyler tore his ACL last year, Conner averaged 20 touches per game and was on a 17-game pace of over 1,800 total yards and 13 touchdowns, including almost 100 targets in the receiving game. They leaned on James Conner last year without Kyler Murray, and they should do it again in 2023 in what could possibly be his final season in Arizona. But if you're a contender and you need that cheap production to bulk up for the season, James Conner is your guy, and he can be had for pennies on the dollar right now. I'm talking the 3.03 in Superflex leagues, Nico Collins and some 4th-round rookie picks, or Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. in his Superflex league. You shouldn't have to pay much more than all of those examples, especially with rookie fever going on right now with rookie drafts. Take advantage of that and pull away an almost surefire top 15 back with a top 10 fantasy ceiling. Next up, we have our fill-in, and I needed to scroll all the way down to tight end 31 in June ADP because that is where Tyler Higbee is, who, fun fact for you, finished as the tight end 6 last year, averaging more fantasy points per game than Kyle Pitts, Greg Dulcich, and Gerald Everett, and only 0.3 points per game less than Pat Freiermuth. And he's not a one-year wonder either because in 2021, he finished as the tight end 14 overall, tight end 13 in points per game, again averaging more fantasy points than Pat Freiermuth, Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet, Evan Ingram. Yeah, that guy right now is currently tight end 31 in ADP. And honestly, I think you can argue that Tyler Higbee is in for a career year in 2023 because the depth chart for the Rams receiving room right now is just, it's not great. Remember, in 2021, the Rams receiving room was Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson, Odell Beckham Jr. for the second half, and Higbee still finished as the tight end 14 that year. And then last year, it was Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, and Higbee finished as the tight end 12 in points per game and tight end 6 overall. Now, in 2023, Cooper Kupp still there, obviously, but after him is Van Jefferson still, Ben Skoranek, Tutu Atwell, and 5th-round rookie Puka Nacua. That's it. Plus, we get a healthy Matthew Stafford back, and all of this is adding up to Tyler Higbee probably seeing 100+ targets for the second year in a row. And if you see 100+ targets as a tight end in fantasy these days, it's almost impossible not to finish inside the top 10, if not higher, with a high catch percentage or a decent number of touchdowns scored, both of which he could do in this Rams offense with a healthy Matthew Stafford. So if you're looking for a quality backup tight end or even another guy to add to the rotation every single week as a streaming candidate, I think Tyler Higbee is your guy, and he can be had at a fraction of the cost of all the other popular guys like Chico Okonkwo, Greg Dulcich, Juwan Johnson, all the rookies this year. He is cheaper than all of them. And I'm not saying that he's a better asset than all of those guys long term, but if you just need someone who can be productive for 2023 alone, take a look at Tyler Higbee. Tony Pollard is probably my favorite post-draft buy in Dynasty right now. He was a huge winner from the NFL draft because the Cowboys didn't touch the running back position until round 6 when they drafted Deuce Vaughn. And look, Vaughn was a fantastic college running back, but he's 5'5", 179 pounds. He's not going to be involved much in this offense as a rookie. He's much more of a kick and punt returner. So as of right now, Pollard's only competition in this Cowboys backfield is Ronald Jones and Malik Davis. So we're talking about a back who is coming off of a huge breakout season in 2022 with over 1,000 yards on the ground, another 370 yards receiving, 12 total touchdowns, and he did most of that damage in the second half of the season. From week 7 on, he was on pace for 1,700 total yards and 17 touchdowns while splitting time with Ezekiel Elliott and only playing 50 to 60% of snaps. So now in 2023, there's no competition for snaps and touches right now. So there's immense upside for Tony Pollard to be a top 10, if not top 5 fantasy running back for the entirety of the fantasy season, not just the second half. I think he realistically could have a Saquon Barkley level season without paying Saquon Barkley level prices. But even if the Cowboys do add someone between now and the start of the season, they bring Ezekiel Elliott back, or they sign Leonard Fournette or Kareem Hunt, someone to take some of the workload and pressure off of Tony Pollard, well, I think that's fine too, because then he's in the same role that he was in last year when he finished as the RB9 in PPR scoring. Right now, the Trade Finder says you can get Tony Pollard for the 110 and the 2.08 in Superflex leagues, or the 1.06 straight up in one quarterback leagues. Another trade I love as a contender is trading down from Breece Hall to Tony Pollard, and you get Tyreek Hill on top of that. Or you go from Metcalf to Tony Pollard and Deebo Samuel. As a contender, these are prices that I'm willing to pay for a fantasy RB1 with a ceiling of a top 5 finish in 2023. But I just wanted to add in one of my favorite win now buys right now at the quarterback position, actually, and that's Matthew Stafford, who is currently the QB 22 in Underdog Best Ball ADP, but he's the QB 29 in May DLF Superflex ADP, which basically means that the community thinks that Stafford is like a bottom 5 starting quarterback in the league right now, which is crazy. And I mean, I get it. He wasn't that good last year. He only played in 9 games, only threw 10 touchdowns, also threw 8 interceptions, then just didn't play it all over the second half of the season with a concussion and a spinal cord contusion. And this was after the whole like elbow sprain infection kind of thing that he was dealing with before the season even started. And on top of all that, he's 35 years old, and if more injuries pop up, his time in the NFL may be limited going forward. However, I do feel like we are overreacting here for just a bad and injured season, almost like we forget that the year prior in 2021, Stafford was the QB 5 overall in fantasy with 4,900 yards, 41 passing touchdowns. Now, I'm not going to say that he's doing that again in 2023, but just 4,000 yards, 25 to 30 touchdowns, that's like an average season for Matthew Stafford, and that would put him as a solid QB2 in fantasy. I mean, Aaron Rodgers last year had 3,727, finished as a QB 13. Tua had 3,525, finished as a quarterback 15. Trevor Lawrence even had 4,100 yards, 30 total touchdowns, finished as the QB6 last year. This is a range that Stafford can easily find himself in this year, and you're buying him right now at QB 29 prices in Dynasty. I mean, just look at these trades. Matthew Stafford in the 211 for the 2.03 and 312 in a Superflex league. What are you getting at 2.03? Like Jonathan Mingo, Roshan Johnson? I'm sending all of that away for a QB2 that I can start in Superflex easily, and you're getting a late second on top of that as well as a kicker. Or what about Stafford for just Trey McBride in a Superflex league? I mean, I like McBride. I think that he has a lot of potential for sure, but that's all he is right now. It's just potential. For those of you out there with Trey McBride on your roster, he's probably not even your starter. He's probably your tight end 2, tight end 3 that you're hoping maybe you start a couple times this year and he develops into somebody that you can start every week. But Stafford, I know I can play every single week. He'll actually produce for you. So I'm taking Matthew Stafford over Trey McBride straight up. And then lastly, this one's really interesting. Matthew Stafford and Ramondre Stevenson for CJ Stroud. And this is really for some specific teams out there. But if you have CJ Stroud and he's like your QB3 that you kind of got out of luxury because you had an extra pick that just ended up being top 5 and you drafted CJ Stroud, but you are competing in 2023, I'm totally fine trading him away for Matthew Stafford, who will probably straight up just outscore CJ Stroud this year. But then you also get Ramondre Stevenson, who I believe can be a top 10 running back this year. So you're getting 2 starters for the price of 1 here to compete this season. I absolutely love this trade. But sometimes it isn't an almost impossible season that causes players to lose value. Sometimes it's just injury, which I think is what happened to Dallas Goedert. See, Dallas Goedert was actually the tight end 3 on the season last year up through week 10, on pace for 80 receptions for over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. But then a shoulder injury late in week 10 kept Goedert out for the next 5 weeks. And even though he returned and had solid production all the way through the Super Bowl, it just doesn't seem like people are aware of what Dallas Goedert was doing prior to the injury last year. He was averaging almost 13 fantasy points per game as a tight end in an offense that was also supporting A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and a top 15 running back in Miles Sanders. Those 13 points per game were pacing with TJ Hawkinson up to that point. They were 2 points per game more than George Kittle and Pat Freiermuth, 5 points per game more than Kyle Pitts. Yet he seems to be lumped in closer to guys like David Njoku and Evan Ingram than talked about more as an elite option at the tight end position like a Hawkinson, Pitts, or George Kittle. Don't make that mistake when looking at tight ends this year. Dallas Goedert could be a league winner based on lower ADP than the rest of the top guys. So those are 6 of my favorite trade targets in Dynasty right now. But if you want to hear about 4 players that I'm actually looking to trade away from my Dynasty rosters, then you can watch that video right up here.